My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 31 years old, and just last fall, I got engaged to the first person who's ever made me feel truly seen. Daniel. He's thoughtful, disarmingly funny, a high school history teacher who wears mismatched socks and believes in handwritten letters. But most importantly, he sees me not as a support character in someone else's story, but as a main character in my own. That may not sound like a big deal to most people, but when you've grown up like I did, invisible in your own home, consistently outshone by a sister who could do no wrong, it feels revolutionary. Emily, my younger sister by 3 years, has always been the family's crown jewel. Piano recitals by age 6, debate team national finalist by high school, Harvard Law by 22, and now a high-powered VP at a Boston law firm. Her achievements weren't just celebrated, they were idolized. Our parents hung framed magazine covers and photos of her handshakes with state senators like trophies in a shrine. At family dinners, every conversation orbited around her orbit, her promotions, her relationships, her potential. Meanwhile, I was the steady one, the independent one, the background music to her spotlight. When I got a job offer from a top tech consultancy firm after graduating with honors, my mom said, "That's nice. Honey, you know, Emily just got invited to a speaking engagement at Yale." It didn't matter how well I did, I was always just the placeholder between Emily's milestones. Still, I tried. I kept showing up. I flew across states for her engagement party. I babysat her dog during her business trips. I sent flowers when she got promoted. I didn't do it for praise. I did it hoping that one day, maybe, they'd look at me with even half the pride they reserved for her. But each time I reached out, the silence echoed louder. There was always a reason why they couldn't visit, couldn't attend, couldn't pick up the phone. They weren't busy. They were just uninterested. And then Daniel entered my life. We met through a mutual friend at a charity auction in Austin. What started as a casual conversation about books somehow turned into 6 hours of wandering the city, sharing childhood stories, fears, hopes. He didn't flinch when I told him about the emotional distance I felt growing up. He listened. He asked questions no one had ever asked before. "What do you want, Claire? What makes you proud of yourself?" He didn't assume I was fine just because I smiled. He didn't expect me to keep performing to be lovable. He just stayed, and that in itself was a revelation. When he proposed kneeling beneath the old pecan tree where we had our first picnic, I didn't just say yes to him. I said yes to building a life where I could breathe, where I could finally stop fighting for a seat at someone else's table and start building my own. Planning the engagement party was a joyful kind of chaos. We wanted something warm and personal, a celebration filled with real laughter, familiar faces, the kind of people who'd seen us cry, stumble, and grow. We rented a charming venue just outside Austin, with exposed brick walls and rows of Edison bulbs hanging like stars. Daniel's mom helped arrange the centerpieces. His students made us a ridiculous but sweet poster. And my best friend Carla flew in from San Francisco to help with logistics. Every detail mattered. Every guest had a handwritten invitation. Even the playlist was carefully curated with songs that had significance to us. It was, in every sense, ours. Of course, I invited my parents. I sent a formal invitation by mail and followed up with a personal note inside. "This means a lot to me. I really hope you'll come." I didn't hear back for weeks. When I finally called, my mother gave a nonchalant, "We'll see what we can do." My father mumbled something about checking the calendar. Emily, she just texted back a single thumbs-up emoji. But I still saved them a table, right near the front. I picked out meal options. I knew they liked my father's favorite salmon entree, my mom's obsession with lemon meringue. I even made sure the wine selection included that obscure white blend my sister once mentioned in passing. Deep down, I still believed that maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me.
They didn't.
The night of the party, that table stayed empty. Every other seat was filled with people who laughed with us, clapped during the toasts, danced under the string lights like it was a movie. But every time I looked in the direction of that empty table, something in my chest tightened. I smiled through the speeches. I thanked the caterer. I posed for photos. But inside, I felt like I was 12 again, sitting alone after a school play, still in costume, waiting for applause that never came. The next morning, I tried not to let the sadness linger. I brewed coffee, played soft music in the kitchen, and kissed Daniel on the cheek when he asked if I was okay. I said I was. I wasn't. At noon, I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Oh, Claire," she said breezily, like nothing had happened. "We were out last night celebrating Emily's promotion. She made VP. You know, it was kind of last minute, everyone was there. It was a big deal." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The words felt like glass splintering in my throat. I thought of the handwritten notes I'd penned to guests, the vows we practiced in the car, the way Daniel looked at me when I walked into the venue, glowing, and none of it had mattered to them. Not enough to show up. "You missed my engagement party for her promotion dinner," I finally asked, though I already knew the answer. My mom sighed, as if I was the one being dramatic. "Honey, it was just one night. Don't make this into a big thing." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just said, evenly, "Then don't be surprised when you miss the wedding too." And I hung up. That was the first time I chose myself. The first time I didn't chase an apology that would never come. But what I didn't expect was what came next, because 2 days later, there was a knock at my door, and standing there, holding something that would unravel years of silence, was my father. His eyes looked older, and in his hand was a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen in half a decade. It was a letter, my letter, and I had never meant for him to read it. It was a letter I had written 5 years ago, never printed, never sent, never even truly finished. Just something I typed on a rainy December night, after yet another Christmas dinner where Emily's name was sung like a hymn and mine barely whispered. It was my purge, my quiet scream into the void. And now, somehow, it was here, crumpled slightly. The ink faded in some parts, like it had been read and reread. My father stood there on my porch, holding it like it weighed more than it should, like it might burn his fingers. "Is this why you're cutting us out?" he asked, voice low, eyes tired, not angry, not sharp like I remembered, just worn. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stepped aside and said simply, "Read it, out loud." He hesitated, glanced down at the paper, then stepped inside. The air in the room felt heavier with him in it, like someone had opened an old door to a room I'd sealed shut years ago. He stood in the middle of our living room, looked at me one last time, and unfolded the letter slowly like he was disarming a bomb. "Dear Mom and Dad," he began, "this isn't a letter I plan to send, because I already know what you'll say, that I'm being too sensitive, that I'm misremembering things, that I'm making it about me, again. But I need to write this, even if no one reads it, even if no one believes it." His voice cracked, not loudly, but in a way that startled even him. He cleared his throat and kept going. "I know Emily is your favorite. You've never said it. You never had to. It's in your eyes when she walks into a room. It's in the way you light up when she talks, and dim when I try. It's in the dozens of framed photos of her, in the stories you tell about her to your friends while I sit there, holding my own news like a secret no one asked for." He paused, his fingers curled tightly around the paper, like he needed to steady himself against it. I didn't move. I let the words fill the room, my words. Words I once wrote in tears and silence. I have spent my whole life trying to earn something that seemed to be given to her freely. Your pride, your attention, your time. And no matter how hard I tried honors classes, internships, job offers, promotions, it was never enough. I wasn't enough. Because I wasn't Emily. His voice faltered again, but this time he didn't stop. He took a deep breath and kept going. I know you'll say I'm being unfair, that I'm jealous, that she needed more support, that I was always the independent one. But independence isn't the same as not needing love. And I'm tired of pretending that I'm not hurt just because I hide it better than she does. At that, he stopped reading, looked at me, really looked. And for a moment, I thought he might say something to defend himself, explain it away, tell me he loved us both equally. But he didn't. He looked back at the letter, his voice quieter now. There's a kind of loneliness, he read. That comes from being surrounded by people who are supposed to love you and still feeling like you're on the outside, pressing your face against the glass. I don't want to keep knocking on a door you only open when she's not home. The silence that followed was brutal. I could hear the tick of the kitchen clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the soft creak of wood beneath his feet. But no words came. For the first time, he seemed to grasp just how deep the fracture was, not a single crack, but 1,000 paper cuts accumulated over decades. I didn't know, he finally said, barely above a whisper. No, I replied. You didn't want to. His face contorted at that something between guilt and disbelief, but he didn't protest. He just looked older than he ever had before, maybe for the first time. He was realizing that regret doesn't always come with a loud crash. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet recognition that the damage is already done. Your mom hasn't seen this, he said after a long pause. And would it matter, I asked, voice even but tired. He blinked slowly, like the weight of that question was settling onto his shoulders now. She'd be upset. He offered weakly. She's upset every time I bring up how I feel. Not because I'm wrong, but because it's inconvenient to her narrative. So no, I don't think it would matter. He nodded, reluctantly. For once, he wasn't defending her, just absorbing. But then came the moment I hadn't anticipated. He said, She loves you, Claire. We both do. I exhaled, a dry, joyless sound. You love the version of me that doesn't ask for anything, who claps for Emily and doesn't make a scene. You love me as long as I play my part. His eyes dropped to the floor. I could see the shame crawl into his posture. He looked like a man standing in the ruins of a house he didn't realize was on fire until it collapsed. But I didn't offer him comfort. Not this time. I shouldn't have let it get this far, he said finally. I should have seen it. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. You were too busy celebrating her. That landed. He flinched not dramatically, but enough that I knew it hurt, that he couldn't unhear it. I didn't come here to hurt you, I added after a beat. I came because I needed you to understand that I'm done pretending. He looked at me again, then down at the letter, which he slowly folded with trembling fingers. I could tell he wanted to say more, maybe an apology, maybe a plea, but something in him knew this wasn't about fixing things in one conversation. This was years of imbalance, of erasure, of emotional abandonment, and it wouldn't be undone with a single tear. Then, as he turned toward the door, he asked, like a child seeking permission, Am I still invited? I paused, not out of indecision, but because I wanted him to feel the weight of that question. I needed him to understand that invitations like respect aren't obligations. They're earned. We'll see, I said quietly. He nodded once, and then he left. 3 days passed. I didn't hear from him. No call, no follow-up, no apology. But that's when the ripple began. Because while I was trying to move forward, The rest of the family was just beginning to notice the crack in the glass. And the next blow. It would come from the one person I should have expected. On the 4th day after my father left, with nothing but a folded letter and tired eyes. The silence broke not from him, not from my mother, but from the person I should have known would strike first, Emily. I didn't get a call. That would have required effort and civility. No. Instead, she did what she always did when attention slipped from her orbit. She staged a performance. I woke up to a text from my cousin Jenna. Short and frantic, Emily posted something. "You should see it before your mom does." My stomach sank as I opened Instagram. And there it was, a carousel of smiling faces. An elaborate brunch spread. Mimosa towers. Sun-drenched laughter. The caption: "When your family shows up for what matters." My mom was tagged. So was my dad. But me, not a trace. It was her own engagement celebration, a surprise party she had no idea about. According to the comments. Except I knew better. This wasn't about love or partnership. This was retaliation. Emily had never let anything, not even someone else's wedding, happen without positioning herself at the center. It was classic misdirection. While I was trying to create a new family, she was reasserting control over the old one. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I didn't even text Jenna back right away. Instead, I just sat on the edge of my bed, the sunlight filtering in through the blinds, casting long lines across the floor. I felt cold. Not angry, not broken, just hollow. Like every part of me that used to care had quietly turned to dust overnight. Daniel walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He looked at me, saw the screen, and said nothing. Just handed me the cup and sat beside me. "You okay?" he asked after a while. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." But he didn't push. He never did. He understood that some wounds don't need salt or bandages. They need silence, space to breathe. Later that afternoon, Jenna called. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I didn't want you to find out like that. I thought maybe it was a one-off post. But then I saw your mom commenting heart emojis. And your dad wrote, 'Proud of you, sweetheart.'" She paused, waiting. I didn't say anything. "Claire," she continued, "they're telling people you uninvited them from the wedding, that you're punishing them for not attending your engagement party." I let out a dry laugh. They didn't even text that night, or the day after. They made their choice. Jenna hesitated, then said something I hadn't expected. "They're making it sound like you're having a breakdown." That stopped me cold. "What, like you're spiraling? That the pressure of the wedding, the comparison, it's all getting to you? Emily said you're acting out for attention." I stood up, the coffee still full in my cup. Of course that's the story. Because the alternative, the truth, would require them to see me as human. As someone hurt, not hysterical. Jenna sighed on the other end. "I just wanted you to know, because it's spreading. People are asking questions, wondering if they should still come, wondering what side to pick." "There are no sides," I said flatly. "There's just truth and the story they're selling to protect their comfort." "I believe you," she said quietly. And I knew she did. But belief wasn't enough. Not when silence had always been the language of our family. That night, I opened the wedding spreadsheet again, looked at the guest list. My parents, Emily. Their names were still there, untouched, like placeholders for an apology that was never going to arrive. I hovered over their rows, then clicked delete, one by one. No drama, no explanation, just gone. Daniel didn't say anything. He was beside me, reviewing table layout options. But when he glanced up and saw the blank spaces, he simply nodded. That nod, the quiet affirmation of my boundaries, meant more than any vow we'd write. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, My mother stood there, crisp beige blazer, pearl earrings, the kind of outfit that said we need to talk more than her words ever could. She held an envelope in her hand. The monogrammed kind she reserved for sympathy cards and thank you notes. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside, but something in me tensed. The last time we'd spoken, she had made it clear without ever saying it that Emily was the axis of her world. I wasn't sure I had room anymore to orbit around that gravitational pull. She sat on the couch, back straight, legs crossed delicately at the ankles. She handed me the envelope. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, handwritten in her looping cursive. I scanned it as she watched me, eyes sharp. It was, unsurprisingly, not an apology. Not really. It was a defense, a thesis statement on parenting, sacrifice, and perception. "We did our best," it read. "You were always more self-sufficient. Emily needed more support." It was never about favorites. It was about balance. I folded it before finishing. "You came here to clear your name," I said, "not to understand me." Her lips tightened. "That's not fair." "No," I replied. "What's not fair is spending 30 years trying to earn affection that was handed to someone else like a birthright. What's not fair is sitting through holidays where my achievements were met with nods, and hers with champagne." She stood up abruptly. "I won't be attacked in my own daughter's home. Then maybe you should ask yourself why your daughter's home doesn't feel like your own anymore." That landed like a slap. But she didn't storm out. She didn't cry. She just looked at me, really looked, for maybe the first time in years. And I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret, just recognition. A brief, terrifying moment of clarity. Then she straightened her shoulders and left. The next day, Emily posted again. Another photo dump, this time of a family dinner my parents, her, a few cousins. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people who matter most." That was the moment I stopped being sad. Not because I didn't care anymore, but because I realized something deeper. I had always tried to fit into a family portrait where I was never invited to stand in the center. Always the background, always the afterthought. And now I was done. But being done didn't mean disappearing. It meant redefining the frame entirely. Not erasing them, but choosing to no longer be defined by them. And somewhere in the quiet that followed, something new began to take root. Not anger, not revenge, but strategy. Because if they were going to rewrite the story, I would write a better one, my own. And the first chapter would begin with a very public, very deliberate declaration of independence, one they couldn't ignore, one they'd have to watch unfold from the outside. It started small, quiet, like most revolutions of the self do. A spreadsheet, a vision board, a late-night conversation with Daniel about the kind of wedding that would feel like us, not like a performance, not like an obligatory parade for people who'd never clapped for me, but something real. A celebration of presence over pedigree, of chosen love over inherited guilt. If they wanted to pretend I was overreacting, fine. But I would make sure the entire world saw exactly what they'd chosen to miss. I called Jenna first. She'd always been on my side, even when staying neutral would have been easier. "I want to change the structure of the ceremony." I told her, "Can you help me rewrite the script?" She paused. "You mean like the vows note, the narrative?" And with those words, the plan began. We moved the wedding venue to a converted greenhouse just outside Austin. All glass and ivy and warmth. A space that felt open. Light filled everything my family never gave me. The guest list was curated with surgical precision people who had actually shown up for me in real life. Old friends, co-workers, Daniel's sweet cousins, and yes, even a few extended relatives who had quietly sent their support after the Emily Post debacle. I didn't invite my parents. I didn't invite Emily. But I didn't block them either. That would have been too merciful. I simply allowed the event to exist without them, and trusted that their absence would say more than my presence ever could. I commissioned a custom art piece for the entrance, Jenna's idea. It was a massive framed quote. "The family you build is stronger than the one you're born into because it's built on choice." Guests walked through a corridor of photo snapshots from my life without my family. Me at college graduations. Me and Daniel hiking the cliffs in Oregon. Me and Jenna at my first apartment. Each one a quiet rebellion. Each one a reminder I had not disappeared. I had simply stopped asking to be seen. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, rumors swirled. Jenna told me my mother had asked around about the wedding date. "She's pretending she just wants to send a card," Jenna said, voice dry. "But she's furious she wasn't invited. Let her be," I said. Maybe the silence will teach her something the shouting never did. Then, 2 days before the wedding, an envelope arrived, no return address, just my name, in my mother's handwriting, neat and familiar. I almost threw it away. But curiosity, that old traitor, won. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, me. Age 6 at my first piano recital. I was looking off stage, mid-bow, expression eager. My mother had written on the back, "You always wanted to be seen. I'm sorry I didn't look sooner." I stared at it for a long time. Then I slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. Not to forget, but to remember clearly. Some apologies arrived too late to rebuild anything, but just in time to remind you why you walked away. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and blue. I expected to feel nervous. I didn't. I felt calm, steady, like I was finally walking into a story I'd written myself. Daniel and I got ready separately, but he'd left a note under my dress hanger. "You've always been the main character. I'm just lucky to be in your plot line." I smiled. For once. The tears that rose weren't from pain. The ceremony began with Jenna standing at the front, officiating, her voice clear, strong. She welcomed everyone and acknowledged, not explicitly, but beautifully, that some journeys to this moment had required more unlearning than others. "Today is not just a wedding," she said. "It's a reclamation of worth, of joy, of narrative." Then the surprise. Before the vows, I stepped forward. The room hushed. I took the mic not to give a toast, but to tell a story. My story. For a long time, I began. I believed that love had to be earned, that you had to be perfect, invisible, accommodating just to be tolerated. I spent years chasing approval that never came, twisting myself into palatable shapes, only to be told I was still too much or not enough. But then I met people like Daniel, like Jenna, like many of you here who taught me something different. That love, the real kind, doesn't come with conditions. It sees you, all of you, especially the messy parts. I let the silence sit, thick and real, then continued, voice unwavering. "So, today, I'm not just marrying Daniel, I'm also divorcing the need to be validated by people who only ever saw me in pieces. I'm choosing wholeness. I'm choosing presence. I'm choosing peace." The applause was immediate, loud, raw, not polite, not performative. It felt like thunder shaking loose years of silence. And when Daniel stepped up beside me, eyes shining, I knew without a trace of doubt that I had chosen correctly. Not just him, not just this life, but myself. We exchanged vows under a canopy of wildflowers and glass. The sun hit the greenhouse just right, casting golden rays through the ceiling like a cathedral of light. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. I exhaled. The reception was a blur of joy. There were no awkward speeches, no glances toward empty chairs. No appeasement, just laughter, clinking glasses, off-key karaoke, and dancing under the stars. Daniel's mom pulled me into a long hug and whispered, "We're your family now, sweetheart. You're home." But even as the night reached its peak, I couldn't help but wonder, had they seen it, the photos, the video snippets, the posts? Surely someone had sent it to them, my mother, with her need to know, Emily, with her hunger to control the narrative. What were they saying now? Did they feel the sting of being excluded? Or were they too busy spinning a version where I'd always been the problem? I didn't have to wait long to find out, because the next morning, as Daniel and I were packing for our mini honeymoon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a voicemail. I let it play, speaker low.
It was Emily.
"You didn't even tell us the date. You didn't give us a chance." Her voice was tight, accusing. "You always make things bigger than they are. And now Mom's upset. And Dad's acting like he lost a child. And everyone's asking me what you're doing. So, congratulations. Claire, you got your spotlight." I stared at the screen, heart strangely quiet. Daniel looked at me. "You want to respond?" I shook my head. No, I didn't, because that message said everything. Not remorse, not accountability, just resentment that I'd finally stopped clapping for the Emily show. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to burn bridges. I just had to stop crossing theirs. I didn't respond to Emily's voicemail. I didn't replay it either. Not because it didn't sting, because it did, but because I'd heard every version of that sentence before. You always make things bigger than they are. Translation: stop naming the pain. You didn't give us a chance. Translation: how dare you expect accountability? And the oldest one: now everyone's upset. Translation: your boundaries are inconvenient. But what none of them understood was this. I wasn't looking to start a war. I was ending one. A silent war I'd been drafted into at birth, told to fight with grace and silence and constant forgiveness. But no more. The day after the wedding, Daniel and I left town. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet 3-day retreat up in the Texas Hill Country. A converted cottage tucked between lavender fields and oak trees, where no one knew our names, and the only sound at night was the wind pressing against the window panes. On the second evening, I found myself sitting on the porch, wrapped in a throw blanket, glass of wine in hand, watching the sky bleed orange and violet. Daniel was inside reading, and I was left alone with a kind of silence I hadn't felt in years. Not empty, not hollow, but clean. No echo of disapproval. No pressure to prove I was worthy of a seat at a table that was never mine to begin with. Just me, breathing like someone who had finally earned the right to rest. And yet, the silence didn't last long. On the third morning, my phone buzzed again. A text. Not from Emily, not from my parents, but from my dad's sister, Aunt Meredith. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Not since she moved to Portland and got too liberal, according to my mother. Her message was simple: Claire, I watched your wedding video. You were luminous. I cried. I'm sorry I never saw how alone you felt all these years. I'd like to change that, if you'll let me. It hit differently, not because it changed the past, but because it proved something I'd almost stopped believing, that people can evolve when they actually want to. That acknowledgement doesn't require grand gestures, just the humility to say, I didn't know, but I do now. I responded. We exchanged a few messages. Nothing deep, not yet. But the door cracked open. Not the old one I'd been pounding on for decades. A new one. One I hadn't known existed. When we got back to Austin, life resumed: emails, grocery lists, unanswered voicemails from relatives who suddenly wanted to talk. I didn't engage. I didn't need to. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was spacious, full of possibility. Jenna came over with photos from the wedding. We laid them out on the coffee table, laughing over Daniel's uncle doing the worm on the dance floor and my boss sobbing during the vows. Then she pulled out a smaller envelope. This came to my mom's house. She said carefully, "Postmarked the day after your wedding. It's from your mom." I froze. "Did you open it?" Jenna shook her head. "It's yours to decide." The envelope felt heavier than it should have. Inside, a folded letter on cream stationery. Her handwriting so familiar, it made my chest ache, looping and careful. The tone, not quite apologetic, not quite defensive, something in between. She said she'd watched parts of the ceremony online, that seeing me so confident, so different, made her realize she'd missed a version of me that had always been there, quietly waiting to be seen. That maybe she hadn't been the mother I needed, but she still hoped to be someone in my life. There was no mention of Emily, no attempt to justify, no excuses, just a single sentence near the end that lingered, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd be grateful for a second chance, even just as a witness to the life you're building." I read it twice, then a third time, then I set it aside. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat quietly with the complicated truth that people who hurt you can still love you, but that love, unexamined and unaccountable, is not always safe to receive. Later that night, I told Daniel about it. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I shrugged. "Nothing. Not right now. I don't need closure. I have clarity." But even as I said it, I knew the truth was more layered. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not really. What I wanted was something far more radical: forgiveness without reconciliation. To be able to say, "I release you," without letting them back in. To stop letting the past shape my future. And maybe, just maybe, to live in a way that honored the girl I used to be, the one who waited and begged and twisted herself into knots just for a scrap of love. The next weekend, I visited the old park where my dad used to take me as a kid. I sat on our favorite bench and pulled out a notebook. Not a letter, just thoughts. I wrote about grief, about inherited silence, about the power of building something from nothing. I wrote about the kind of mother I might be one day, not perfect, but present. Then I left the notebook under the bench. Maybe someone would find it, maybe no one would. But it felt like the right place to leave that version of myself behind. 2 weeks later, Emily posted a carousel of family photos. Her, my parents, a new puppy, wine glasses raised. The caption read, "Grateful for my constants." I didn't feel anger, just a faint, distant ache, like a healed scar pulling in the cold. She could have them. I had built something better. And then, on a rainy Tuesday, I received a package, no return name. Inside was a book, Women Who Run with the Wolves. No note, but someone had dog-eared the chapter on boundaries and rebirth. I smiled. Maybe it was Aunt Meredith. Maybe not. Either way, it felt like a message from the universe. That night, Daniel and I curled up on the couch. "Do you miss them?" he asked softly. I thought about it. I miss the idea of them. I said, "Not the reality." He nodded. "You know, I think your story will help more people than you realize." "Maybe," I said. But I didn't do it for that. I did it for me. And, as the storm tapped gently on the windows, I finally understood something I'd been chasing my whole life. I didn't need to be invited to someone else's table. I could build my own. And the people who belonged would find their seat without needing to earn it. Story 2. A whip of wind howled through the cottonwoods, rattling the window panes like brittle teeth. The ranch house stood mostly silent, just the creak of a chair, and the scrape of my spoon in a chipped tin bowl. I was halfway through lukewarm stew, staring at the dying fire, when the knock came. Soft, too soft for a threat, too steady to be lost. I didn't move at first, just listened. Then another knock, same rhythm. I rose slowly, 37 years old, but most days I feel closer to 60. Life out here aged me in ways mirrors don't reflect. I didn't grab the rifle leaning by the door, but I glanced at it. Old habits. Outside, the wind had kicked up. The porch lantern swung in the breeze, casting jagged light across the steps. And there she stood, a woman, maybe early 30s, soaked to the bone, clothes tattered but stitched, boots hand-mended. Behind her, 2 kids, a boy around 6 gripping a frayed satchel, and a girl, smaller, wearing boots far too big for her feet, hollow-cheeked, both of them. She looked at me and said evenly, "They're not yours, but they need someone like you." I stared. Words don't come easy to me, and this wasn't the kind of moment you prepare for. "You've got the wrong place," I managed. "No," she said, I didn't ask for names. I didn't ask why she looked like she'd ridden through hell. I just stepped back, shut the door, and slid the bolt into place. I stood there, hand on the knob, feeling like I'd just heard something I wasn't supposed to. I didn't sleep much that night. But when morning came, they were still there, curled on the porch, huddled beneath a thin shawl, like ghosts too stubborn to move on. I cursed under my breath and opened the door. "You'll take breakfast in the barn," I said. She nodded, didn't thank me. I respected that. They moved slow, stiff from the cold. The boy looked back once like he was memorizing the house, just in case it vanished. In the barn. She settled the kids on a hay bale before she sat. I handed her a bundle bread, jerky, a few apples, and turned to go. "Why me?" I asked, hand on the doorframe, out of all the doors you could have knocked on. She broke a piece of bread in half for the girl and said, "Because yours was the only name I remembered." I didn't ask what that meant, not yet. That afternoon, the boy trailed me out to the fence line. I didn't invite him, but he kept up despite his boots sticking in the thawed mud. "You know how to work?" I asked. He nodded. "Hold the nail bucket, don't wander." He dropped the bucket once when a jackrabbit bolted nearby, but didn't cry or run. I didn't yell either, just handed him a piece of jerky when the rail was set. He ran back to the barn beaming. Halfway there, he turned and waved. I didn't wave back, but I watched until he was gone from view. That evening, I found a drawing pinned to the barn door, crayon on the back of a church bulletin. 3 stick figures too small, 1 tall, all holding hands. That night, when I walked into the barn, the kids were asleep. She was by the lantern, sharpening a kitchen knife. "If you're thinking of robbing me," I said, "you picked the wrong mark." Without looking up, she said, "If I wanted you dead, I'd have waited until you slept. Knives for gutting a rabbit." I didn't ask where she found the rabbit, just leaned against the stall and watched her. "You still haven't told me your name." She paused, set the blade down with care. Would it matter? "Makes it easier to know whether to trust you." She met my gaze, and I saw it fear. Yes, but behind it, grief, thick as anything I'd ever seen. "I was married once," she said. "He drank, gambled, and when he ran out of things to lose, he promised the boy to someone worse. I said no. He raised his hand. I left, took the kids and ran. Didn't stop until the horse dropped under us. The barn went silent except for the wind brushing the walls. "You said you knew my name." She nodded. "Your brother brought supplies to the town I was in. Gave me a coat once when winter came early. Said his little brother back home didn't know how to button his properly." "That ghost stepped between us then." I said nothing, but I thought of the promise I made at my brother's grave that no one would suffer under my roof again. "Those kids?" I asked. "They his?" "No," she said, "but they need someone who remembers what kindness smells like." I left without another word. The next few days passed like that, sharing the land but not much else. The boy followed me, always a step behind, always watching. The girl stayed close to her mother, but I caught her slipping an apple to my old hound one afternoon. He didn't snap. He just laid there, tail wagging. At night, I heard the woman humming something low, not a song, more like a memory. I wanted to ask her, "What's the real reason you came here?" But I didn't, because if she answered, I might have to carry that truth too. Then on the fourth night, I saw the dust trail. One rider, maybe two, moving fast. I whistled once. She came out, kids in tow, eyes already hard. "Get in the barn," I told her. She didn't argue, just grabbed the kids and the knife and disappeared inside. The rider reached the fence line. Tall man, black duster, horse foamed from the run. He didn't dismount. "You the one harboring two brats and a woman with a fake name," he called. I stepped forward, rifle low but ready. "Depends who's asking." He grinned. "Nobody you want to meet twice." "What's your business?" "She's got something don't belong to her." "She doesn't belong to anyone." "Didn't take you for the hero type," he said. "I'm not," I replied, "but I'm not a coward either." He didn't draw, just turned his horse and rode off slow, not retreat, more like a promise. That night, I bolted the door, moved a second blanket into the barn. The wind didn't bring a knock this time, just the cold reminder that something was coming and next time. It wouldn't ask permission. The next morning started with silence. The kind of silence that knows something is out of place. The kind that makes you put your coffee down and check the door twice. The woman she still hadn't offered a name stood on the porch, staring at the horizon like she could see the future coming through the fog. The kids were quiet too. The boy drew shapes in the dirt with a stick. The girl fed crust to the hound, who hadn't left her side since the first night. "You expecting him back?" I asked her. She didn't look at me, not him, but someone. I didn't press, just refilled my cup and handed her one. She took it with both hands. "You still haven't asked." "Asked what?" "Why we're really here." I took a long sip before answering, because I figure if you haven't told me yet, it's either not ready or not safe. She gave me a look half respect, half caution. "It's both." That afternoon, I taught the boy how to hammer posts. He was clumsy, sure, but he learned fast, didn't complain even when he split his thumb. "Don't favor it," I told him. "I'm not, You will later." He smiled, then asked, "You always live alone?" "For a while now." "Don't you get lonely?" I looked at him. Sometimes, not as much lately. He didn't say anything else, just held the next rail steady and waited for my nod. That night, I found her in the kitchen. She'd boiled some kind of broth from dried beans and root vegetables I didn't know I had. The kids sat at the table, quiet but eager. The girl had drawn something on the windowsill in charcoal, another 3 stick figures, holding hands. "You cook?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Since I was 9. "You clean?" "Tato." "If it's a problem, I'll stop." "It's not." I sat. The food was simple but warm, and the girl whispered a thank you before she took her first spoonful. The boy ate like he hadn't in weeks. After dinner, I pulled a box from the closet. Inside, an old revolver, clean, light. I set it on the table between us. "You know how to use one." She didn't flinch, just looked me in the eye. "If I have to." "That man who came yesterday," I said, "he's not done." "I know." Later that night, she stood on the porch wrapped in a quilt. The wind had picked up again. The lantern swung. "They'll come soon," she said. "Because of you." She shook her head. "Because of the boy." That caught me off guard. He's different, she added. Yours? No, his mother died giving birth to the girl. I was her sister. Their father didn't make it through the last winter. I kept them because no one else would. You could have left them at a church. I couldn't. That was all she said. That was all I needed. The next day passed with an odd sort of rhythm. She washed clothes by the creek, hands red from the cold. The boy helped me rehang the barn door, this time without dropping a single nail. At dusk, the girl brought me a small stone, round, smooth, with a hole in the middle. It's lucky, she said. You keep it. I took it. Did you make this hole? No, she said. Proud the water did. By nightfall, the wind dropped, too suddenly. I was sitting by the fire when the dog growled low and long. I stood slowly, set down my cup, and reached for the rifle. The barn door creaked. I was at the porch in 3 steps. Nothing moved. Then I heard a whistle. 3 notes, same as before. Then silence. I turned back inside, locked the door, loaded every round I had. The boy watched me with wide eyes. Something's wrong, ain't it? Something's coming. He nodded like he understood. That night, I didn't sleep, neither did she. We took turns watching the windows. No one came. But by morning, there were tracks near the barn, fresh, measured, a man on foot circling the house. I followed the trail to the smokehouse and found him. A wiry man with a rat's face and 1 bad eye, crouched behind the shed, fiddling with wire. You're not very good at hiding, I said, rifle aimed at his chest. He raised his hands. I'm not here to fight. Then why the knife on your belt? Insurance. I knocked him out clean and tied him to the beam inside the smokehouse. He woke spitting blood and curses. Why are you here? She's got something don't belong to her. She's got 2 kids and a name. The boy, he said the boss says he's got something hidden, a map, a ledger, I don't know, just that he's worth money. Does he even know what they're talking about? No, but that don't matter. He grinned. Blood on his teeth. They're coming. You can't stop them. I left him there, alive, but not free. When I returned to the house, she was already waiting. He's not after me, she said. He's after the boy. Why? She looked down. His father wasn't just some drunk. He was a federal agent, working undercover with a land theft crew. He had records names, numbers, dates. Then he died before he could report back. And now they think the boy has it, or knows where it is. Does he? No, but they won't believe that. We moved the kids to the cellar. She gathered what food she could carry. I filled the ammo belts. The boy tried to help. I gave him a smaller rifle, not loaded. When I say hide, you don't argue, I told him. He nodded. 2 days later, smoke rose from the east. Not fire, gunpowder. A warning. They're close, she said. I dug shallow trenches and barricaded the porch with old feed crates. By noon, they came. 3 riders. The man in front wore a gray duster, tall, broad shoulders, hat pulled low. You the one keeping the boy, he called. I'm the one standing between you and him. He's not yours. He is now. They didn't argue. The first rider raised his rifle. I fired first. Dropped him clean. Then chaos. Gunfire ripped through the porch. The barn took a hit. The windows shattered. She shot one clean through the leg. He went down hard. The last man charged fast, wild, yelling curses. I stepped into his path and shot him in the chest. He crumpled at my feet. Silence. Then a scream. From the barn. I ran. Found her pinned beneath a 4th man bigger, meaner. Came on foot, circled wide. He had a knife. She had blood on her hands, but she fought. The boy burst in behind me, aiming the empty rifle. "Stop!" he cried. The man turned, and I tackled him, full weight. We hit the dirt, rolled, fists, elbows, blood. He stabbed me once. I didn't feel it. She grabbed the revolver, fired one shot. The man slumped, dead. When the dust settled, we were still standing. Barely. The kids ran out. The boy held on to me like he wouldn't let go. The girl clung to her. She whispered, "Is it over?" "For now," I said. We buried the bodies by the old fence line, marked the graves with nothing. The scout we'd tied up begged for his life. I let him crawl away. He wouldn't get far. Back in the house. The girl drew a new picture. This one had 4 figures. The woman made supper. The boy helped with the dishes. No one cried. No one cheered. But we sat down, at the same table, like a family. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The morning after the gunfight, I found her in the kitchen. She was rinsing blood out of a rag, sleeves rolled high, jaw set. Her hands moved with purpose, but her eyes told a different story, distant, tired, watching something only she could see. I stood in the doorway, hand against my stitched side. The gash burned like hell, but it wasn't the worst pain I carried. "You should have let me bleed," I said. She didn't turn. "You didn't give me the option. You could have taken the kids and gone. They wouldn't have left without you." I leaned against the wall. They would have survived. She turned then, and something about her face made me stop talking. "You think surviving is enough?" she asked. "You think that's all they deserve?" I didn't answer. That evening, the kids sat on the porch swing. The boy read from a book I didn't know we had. The girl held a daisy chain she'd woven from weeds along the fence. Inside, the fire was low. I sat with her at the table, my shirt off, bandage wrapped across my ribs. She dipped a cloth in boiled water, then pressed it against my skin. "You've done this before," I said. She nodded. "My sister's husband used to come home from bar fights looking worse." "You patch him up too?" "No, he didn't ask." Silence settled. She wrung the cloth, then said, "I need to tell you something." I braced myself. "I knew your brother," she said, "not just in passing. I was there when he died." The air between us shifted. My stomach twisted. "I didn't know," I said flatly. "My husband dragged me to Bitter Creek, said he had a job. I didn't know it meant blood. I didn't know until the shooting started." She paused. "Your brother, he tried to get a boy out from under a table. I helped, but the ceiling collapsed." My hands clenched under the table. "That was my nephew," I said. "I was supposed to meet them that day, but I didn't." Her voice dropped. "You weren't there." "I was drunk. Picked a fight with a preacher the night before. Woke up too late." Neither of us spoke for a long time. "Finally," she said, "I buried the boy with a scarf your brother gave me. Blue, torn at the corner." I remembered that scarf. He never went anywhere without it. "You brought that history to my porch," I said, unknowingly or not. "I didn't plan it, but when I recognized your name, I had to know. I had to see if kindness ran in the family." I stood slowly, wincing, walked to the window, outside. The boy was teaching the dog to sit. The girl giggled from the swing. "You think I'm that man?" I asked. "No," she said, "but you might be better." The next day passed in silence, but it wasn't cold. She baked bread. The girl picked berries. The boy helped me clear the north fence. He didn't ask about the guns or the graves, just walked behind me like he belonged there. That evening, we ate together again. No prayers, no big talk, just hands passing plates, quiet laughter from the girl, and the boy reaching for a second slice. Afterward, I stepped outside. She followed. We sat on the porch steps, her shoulder brushing mine. I never asked your name, I said finally.
Eva, she replied. Eva Monroe.
I nodded. And them? Sarah and Theo. I looked at the stars. They've been through hell. So have you? We didn't say anything else, just sat there. For the first time, I realized I wasn't waiting for something to end. I was waiting for something to begin. 2 nights later, we heard the sound. Not a knock. Not horses. It was a whistle. Same 3 notes. I rose from bed and grabbed the rifle. Eva was already pulling boots on the kids, wrapping blankets around their shoulders. We moved into the cellar without a word. This time, I didn't wait on the porch. I crouched behind the fence, rifle ready. Nothing came. Just silence. But by dawn, the smokehouse door hung open. Inside, scratched into the dirt, were 3 initials. Not mine, not Eva's. The Scout. He'd come back, or someone had. I doubled the locks. Eva nailed a crossbar across the barn door. The kids were told not to leave the house, not even for the creek. For 2 days, we waited. Then, late one night, a man came on foot, beard down to his chest, rifle slung across his back. He didn't try to hide. He stopped just outside the fence and called out, "Monroe, you've run long enough." Eva stood behind me. I could feel her shaking. "Go inside," I told her. "I know him," she said. "His name's Briggs. He worked with my husband. Worse than him." Briggs stepped forward. "You have something that belongs to me." "She doesn't belong to anyone," I shouted back. I wasn't talking about her. He was talking about Theo. The shootout happened fast. I fired first, missed. He ducked behind a tree and fired back, clipping the post near my head. Eva shot next. Her bullet hit his shoulder. He dropped his rifle and ran. I chased him, rifle in hand. Caught up by the creek. He tried to swing a knife. I kicked it away. Held him under the water until the bubbles stopped. When I came back, Theo was standing on the porch, not crying, just watching. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes," I told him I did. That night, Eva didn't sleep. Neither did I. She finally asked, "What now?" "We rebuild." And after, I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Weeks passed. The kids started smiling more. Sarah picked wildflowers and braided them into fence posts. Theo rode the old mule like he'd been born to it. Eva and I, well, we talked more, laughed a little. She patched my shirts. I repaired her boots. Some nights we sat by the fire and didn't say a word. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like peace. Not the kind you win. The kind you grow. One night, I asked her, "Do you still see their faces from back then?" "Every night," she said. "But now, I also see yours." That landed hard. Because it meant she trusted me. It meant she stayed. The last time it snowed, Sarah came running in with a handful of white flakes melting in her mittens. She said, "It's soft today." I looked at Eva. She smiled. "It is." I never thought I'd be the kind of man who raised someone else's kids, who kept their drawings on the barn door, who added sugar to coffee because Sarah liked it that way. But here I am, somewhere between the quiet and the storm, between the fire and the frost. I found something worth keeping. Not blood, not legacy, just family. And if they come again, well, they'll find the door still standing, and a man who's not afraid anymore. Story 3. I'm not sure what I expected the day we were marched into that auction yard. But silence wasn't it. Not that thick, sunstruck kind that sits on your chest and presses. The kind where no one breathes too loud, where dust floats through the air like something sacred and profane at the same time. People whispered behind hands, shifted uncomfortably in their boots, and stared without fully looking. The town of Rutherfield wasn't big, but days like this made it feel smaller than a coffin.
I was 19. My name's Ivy, and my sister my twin. Though we never looked, it is Leona. We'd survived a rail camp winter that didn't spare much. Hunger first, then the fever. It gutted the place. We were two of the last to leave, and barely that. No parents, no home, just each other. And now we were being sold.
Sold. Even now. Saying it aloud feels like choking on rust. You don't forget the moment your name gets attached to a price tag. I remember standing there on the platform. The sheriff's voice flat as he read out our names. Ivy and Leona Burns. He called. Sold together unless bid separates. Leona stood beside me, hand resting on the curve of her belly. 6 months along. Maybe. She hadn't said much about the father. But I knew enough. I'd kept her fed, clothed, alive. I wasn't about to let her go to a stranger alone. But no one wanted both of us, not when one was ruined. As someone said too loudly, a rancher asked how far along she was if it would come out white. I locked eyes with him and didn't blink. Another man asked if there was a discount for taking the pregnant one. That one almost got me hanged. The sheriff warned me with his eyes when I snapped. We're not splitting. You don't get a say, he growled. But someone else did. A voice from the back 60, for both. Heads turned. The voice didn't shout, just stated it, flat and final. The man who spoke was tall, rough around the edges, and wore dust like a second skin. Didn't look rich, didn't look eager, either. His name was Weston Hale. He didn't wait for applause or thanks, just walked off without a word, like he'd bought a sack of feed, not two human beings. I took Leona's elbow and followed, not because we trusted him, but because there was no other direction to go. His wagon rattled like bones down an endless road. He didn't offer his name, and we didn't ask. The silence stretched. Leona rested one hand on her belly the entire ride. I kept myself between her and the world. By sundown, his land appeared, if you could call it that. A house with peeling shutters, a barn listing to one side, fence posts giving up the ghost. It wasn't much, but it was better than the dirt lot we came from. This is it, he said. I stepped down first, helped Leona, watched him as he watched us. No hunger in his eyes, just fatigue. Inside, the house smelled like wood smoke and loss. There were only 2 beds, his late wife's, and one he'd built himself. We got the spare room. You married? I asked, mostly out of suspicion. Widowed, he said. I'm sorry, Leona offered. He shrugged. Don't need sorrow, just stating facts. He left us alone that first night. Went out to the barn and hammered something that didn't need fixing. We unpacked nothing, we had nothing to unpack. Leona sat by the window, staring at the sky. I sat by the door. Next morning, a woman showed up. Maudie Greer, one of those town women who always had a basket in one hand and judgment in the other. She squinted at Weston as she handed him something wrapped in gingham. You know what people are saying? She warned. He didn't flinch. People always talk. Ain't my job to chase their mouths. She's with child. Maudie hissed. Law might come asking questions. They can ask, he said, then shut the door. That was the day I started watching him more closely. Leona wasn't eating much. She wouldn't say it out loud. But she was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. When Weston asked if she was sick, I snapped before I could help it. She's tired. That's not a crime. Doctor rides through next week, he said. She won't talk to him. I'll still ask. He didn't expect thanks, and I didn't give it. A week passed, slow, dry, the kind of time that leaves splinters in your thoughts. I worked the washboard. Leona sewed by lamplight. Weston fixed things around the property that were beyond saving. like if he could stitch his own life back together with enough nails and willpower. We weren't family, not yet, but something was shifting. He started leaving gloves by the table, cut firewood a little higher than usual so I didn't have to strain. I found a flower on the windowsill one morning, laid gentle as a breath, not in a vase, just there. Leona saw it and smiled. One night, I caught him on the porch with his shoulders hunched like the sky had gotten heavy. "You always work that hard?" I asked. He looked up. "Nothing grows if you don't. Even dead ground. Especially that." We didn't laugh, but something passed between us. Respect, maybe, or the barest edge of trust. Sheriff Klein rode out not long after. "You've got them girls here," he said, spitting tobacco near Weston's boots. "They work," Weston replied. "They stay quiet. One's showing." "I know."
You married her?
"No." "You plan to—" Weston didn't answer, just stared at the sheriff until the man clicked his tongue and rode off. Leona was watching from the window. She'd heard every word. Later, I asked Weston what he planned to do. "Give her my name," he said. "It might not fix things, but it'll make it harder for the law to break her." "You expect her to love you for that?" "No," he said, "I expect her to survive." I sat on that porch with him that night. Neither of us said another word. But in the dark, I stopped feeling like livestock with a receipt. I started feeling like something more. The first rain came 3 days after the sheriff left, just enough to wake up the dust and give the air a metallic tang like something bigger was coming. That evening, I found Weston in the barn, reinforcing the stall doors even though nothing had broken them. "You expecting a storm?" I asked. He didn't stop hammering, not the kind you can see coming. Leona had been quiet all day. She sat on the porch with her feet up, cradling her belly, staring out like she was watching for something that wouldn't show itself. I knew that look. I'd worn it most of our childhood. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The gossip didn't stop just because we were out of sight. If anything, it got worse. Word got around that Weston was playing house with a pregnant girl. Someone said I was his mistress. Someone else said I was the real wife, and Leona was just a cover for something worse. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter in Rutherfield. What mattered was story, and people were all too eager to tell one, especially if it came with a villain. Maudie Greer came again, this time with fabric and a smirk. "Thought Leona might want something decent to wear to church," she said, "now that she's respectable." I stared at her. "She's been respectable longer than you've been polite." Her smile faltered. She left the fabric. And the insult. Leona didn't touch the fabric for 2 days. Then she pulled it out one evening and started sewing. Her fingers were swollen, but she worked like it was the only way to keep her mind from splitting open. I sat beside her while she worked. "You don't have to prove anything," I said. "I know," she whispered, "but I want to." That week, Weston married her. No preacher, no witnesses, just a piece of paper signed in pencil and tucked into the Bible on his nightstand. He gave it to her without ceremony. She folded it 3 times, tucked it into her sewing kit, and kissed him on the cheek. I watched from the doorway. I don't know what I expected. Fireworks tears instead. There was just silence. But it wasn't empty. It was chosen. And that mattered more than anything else. The next time the sheriff came, he brought a warning. "You've stirred up a lot of talk." He told Weston, "Danton's boy, the one who was with the rail crew, he's telling people the baby's his. Says she ran. Says you covered it up." Weston didn't blink. "He's lying." "Doesn't matter." The sheriff said, "Truth don't count when folks want blood. I'll hold off as long as I can. But you should prepare." When he left, Weston sat on the porch for a long time, staring at the tree line. "She's scared," he said eventually. I nodded. "We all are." That night, Leona came into the kitchen after dark. Her eyes were red, and she looked older than 19. "He hasn't touched me," she said. I didn't understand at first. "Not once," she added. "Not since the paper." I set down my coffee. "Did you want him to?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Barely." I thought maybe I was worth something now. "You were always worth something," I said. "You just forgot." She leaned into me and cried. I held her, the way I used to when we were kids sleeping in a mining tent, afraid of thunder and drunk men. A few nights later, I found Weston fixing the north fence by lantern light. "You knew she was pregnant when you bought us," I said. "I did. And you still did it." "I couldn't leave her there." "You didn't come to save her." "No," he said. "I came to not be like the rest of them." He didn't say anything more. Didn't need to. I left the lantern beside him and went back inside. 3 days after that, Leona's past came knocking. A boy barely out of his teens, skinny and red-faced, showed up at the gate, said he'd come for her, said the baby was his. "You married him," he spat. "That old man." I was there before Weston. I stood between the boy and the porch steps. "She didn't write because she didn't owe you anything." He ignored me, looked past me to Leona, who stood in the doorway. "I was scared," she said, "but I'm not anymore." The boy turned pale. Weston appeared behind me then, hammer still in hand. He didn't say a word, just looked at him. That was enough. The boy backed away like he'd touched fire. He didn't run, but he didn't stay long either. I shut the gate behind him, hard. That night, I sat on the porch with the shotgun across my lap. I have never belonged anywhere, I said to Weston. He didn't respond right away. "If it burns," he finally said, "I'll rebuild it." I looked at him sideways. "You would," I said. He nodded. "Maybe not pretty, but I'd try." The fire came 3 days later. It started in the barn. Kerosene and kindling someone meant for it to burn hot and fast. I woke to smoke and Leona screaming. Weston was already outside, barefoot, throwing water like it could hold back a storm. I ran for Leona, dragged her out while the baby still kicked inside her. Weston saved the horses, saved what tools he could. He pulled Leona's keepsake box from the flames and dropped it beside her like it was worth more than gold. The barn collapsed minutes later. We sat in the dirt, coughing and covered in ash, watching the fire take what little hadn't already been broken. Weston dropped beside me, chest heaving. "You should have stayed back," I said. "It's my land," he replied, voice hoarse. "My fire." "You keep trying to fix things by yourself," I said. "But we're here. We can carry it too." He looked at me, really looked. "I remember you saying you'd make your name worth something." I said. "I remember," he whispered. I reached for his hand and held it. Not for him, for all of us. By morning, the fire was out. The barn was gone, but the house still stood. So did we. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The barn was nothing but scorched ribs and smoke stains. The ash clung to our boots for days. Even after the wind had moved on, Weston spent the mornings rebuilding in silence, muscles moving with quiet fury. He didn't curse, didn't complain, just drove nails into charred wood like it could keep the world from falling apart again. Leona got quieter, too. The fire had shaken something loose in her, something she'd kept sealed beneath that gentle calm of hers. She sat on the porch most afternoons, hand on her belly, not crying, not smiling, just watching. Like she was waiting for the next thing to go wrong. I kept busy. That's how I've always handled grief, turned it into labor. I patched the roof, chopped the firewood, checked the fence lines twice a day. Didn't say much, didn't need to. But something about the air had changed, and it wasn't just the smell of smoke. It was the feeling that someone or something was still watching. It happened the following week. Leona stood barefoot on the porch, her back straight despite the weight she carried. Her dress stretched over her stomach. She pressed one hand to her lower back and winced. I was drying linens and caught the look on her face.
"It's starting," she said. Just those 2 words.
We didn't panic.
There wasn't time.
I stripped the sheets from the line. Weston boiled water. We moved fast, like people who've done this before, even if we hadn't. The wind outside was dry, hot, and restless, brushing against the siding like a warning. But the real storm was in the room. Leona's labor came slow at first, then fast, then too fast. She screamed once high and sharp, and then she went silent. Her body arched, her fingers clawed the quilt. And for a second, I thought we'd lose her. But then the baby came. Small, loud, wet with life. I held her for just a breath before handing her over. Leona's arms wrapped around the child like a shield. She didn't cry, not yet. She just looked at her daughter like she had finally remembered something she'd forgotten a long time ago. Weston stepped into the room, eyes wide like he'd just walked into a church. "Will you name her?" Leona asked, voice thin. He hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Sylvie," he said, "after my mother." Leona nodded, eyes still locked on the baby. Sylvie Hale. And just like that, something inside this house shifted again. A name was spoken. A life had begun. And we weren't just 3 broken people trying to survive anymore. We were something else now. That night, I stepped out onto the porch and watched the last light bleed over the horizon. The land was still blackened in places. The barn was half raised. The fence was splintered again. But there was peace, too. Not the kind that comes from things being perfect, but the kind that comes from knowing they're real. Weston joined me, didn't say anything for a long while, just stood there with his hands in his pockets. "She's healthy," he finally said. "She's safe," I replied. He nodded. "She's loved," I added. He turned toward me. "That she is." A few days later, the sheriff came back, hat in hand, eyes tired. "Folks are still talking," he said. "They always do." Weston replied. "The boy, the one who claimed the child, left town, headed west. Word is he won't be back." "Then let him stay gone." The sheriff nodded. "I've done what I can. But just so you know, you've still got people watching. People who don't forget." Weston didn't flinch. "Let them watch. We're not hiding." The sheriff looked over at me. "You still planning to stay?" I folded my arms. We didn't survive all that just to run. He tipped his hat and rode off. Later that evening, Weston found me mending one of Sylvie's blankets. He set something on the table beside me, a small tin box, the kind used to hold nails or bullets. Inside was a folded document. My name, his name.
"You did it for Leona?" I said.
He nodded. "And now for you." I didn't ask.
"I know, but you earned it anyway."
I didn't cry. I didn't thank him. But I felt something settle in my chest that hadn't been there before. A kind of belonging that didn't require chains or blood or vows. Just choice. Leona healed slow, but steady. She sang to the baby, cleaned her gently with boiled cloth, watched her breathe like it was a miracle, which it was. We kept rebuilding, together. The barn stood again by midsummer, not as tall, but stronger. The fences were tighter, the land still dry, but kinder. And one morning, Sylvie laughed for the first time, this bubbling, hiccuping sound that filled every corner of the house. We all stopped what we were doing, even Weston. We just listened. And for once, it was the only sound that mattered. They still talk about us in town, whisper behind backs, call us names they don't dare say to our faces. But we've stopped listening. There are fields to seed, goats to milk, a child to raise. We've built something here, not from perfection, but from grit. Not from forgiveness, but from fire. And every day, we stay, we love, we grow. Because we chose this. And in the end, that's stronger than anything the world ever tried to take from us.